to this panel session, Tolerance to Transformation, Addressing Misogyny at Work. Our moderator for today's session is Professor Deepa Sethi. I request all the esteemed panelists, along with our moderator, to please join me on the stage. May I request our director, Professor Debashish Chatterjee, to present the esteemed panelists with ponadas. While we do so, may we have a warm round of applause for all the panelists. Ms. Titiksha Shrivastava is an actor, classical dancer, and practicing media and entertainment lawyer based in Mumbai, where she leads her own entertainment law practice. Ms. Dipakshi Mehandru is a seasoned corporate affairs professional with nearly 2 decades of experience in public affairs, policy advocacy, and reputation management. Professor Roberta Fida is Head of Department of Leadership and Management at Aston Business School. Her name appears in Stanford University's global database of top 2% scientists. Ms. Deepti Bopaya is an athlete turned banker turned administrator who has spent over a decade driving systemic change in Indian sports, including leading Go Sports Foundation as CEO, and shaping the journeys of more than 70 Olympians and Paralympians. Thank you, sir. I now invite Professor Deepa and the panelists to begin the discussion.
A very good afternoon. It's a privilege to moderate the panel on Tolerance to Transformation, Addressing Misogyny at Work. I want to begin with a truth that comes both from research and personal experience. Misogyny at work doesn't always enter loudly. It hides in tones, in how credibility is questioned, in who gets interrupted, and in who is quietly told to adjust. It doesn't always announce itself through aggression or discrimination. It whispers. It hides in the casual remark, the polite dismissal, the humor that isn't funny. We've all heard it. You women are too emotional. You must be rushing home, the kitchen is waiting for you. Or the one we've heard more times than we care to count. Your name is there in the committee, obviously because we need diversity. These are not isolated jokes. These are systemic microaggressions that chip away at confidence, meeting after meeting, day after day. When a man takes a stance, he's assertive. When a woman does so, she is dominating. When men gather, they are discussing strategy. When women do, they are gossiping. For years, we have been taught and conditioned to tolerate. For long, many women chose silence to avoid confrontation, to stay professional. But silence isn't neutrality, it's permission. And tolerance is not virtue, it is survival. And when survival becomes the standard, the system wins. And every time we tolerate, we teach the system it can get away with. And that is why we are here today, to move from tolerance to transformation, to examine how each of us across fields challenge misogyny, not just when it is loud, but when it is casual, subtle, or hidden under numerous masks. And then comes transformation, which begins when we move from endurance to evolution, when we no longer aspire merely to occupy space, but to reshape it, define it. And today's discussion brings together 4 incredible women who have navigated that path from tolerance to transformation. A big round of applause for them. Please join me in welcoming once again Ms. Titiksha Srivastav, a lawyer turned actor, who brings unique insights from 2 intense worlds, the courtroom and the camera, each deeply shaped by power, limelight, and perception. Ms. Dipakshi Mahendru, Director for India Government Affairs at Intel Corporation, who steers complex policy ecosystems and brings a strong voice for women in tech and governance. Professor Roberta Fida, a good friend, thank you, from Aston Business School, UK, whose pioneering work on moral disengagement, silence, and voice helps us understand why good intent is not enough without accountability. And Ms. Deepti Bopaya, the former CEO and now board member of the Go Sports Foundation, an athlete herself, who is redefining exclusion in Indian sport, building equity for athletes across gender and ability. Welcome, and thank you for being here. So this entire panel discussion is, it has 3 questions. They will be coming up with their insights. So each one of you comes from a different world, yet you find misogyny everywhere. So let's start with your lived experience. So we go from past to present to future. So the first question, in your professional journey, what did misogyny look like? Not in its obvious form, but in the subtle ways it tried to silence, sideline, or test you. And what was the turning point that made you name it for what it was? So we begin with Titiksha.
First of all, it's a huge honor to be sharing the panel with such inspiring minds. A huge gratitude to the director of IIMK. Thank you for being here in the discussion. And a huge thanks to Deepa ma'am for bringing such important conversations on the table. I believe for me, I have had an experience of 2 very different worlds, that is law and entertainment. And I believe that misogyny existed in both the professions, but in a very different forms, I would say. So while practicing as an advocate in a law firm initially after my college, in the initial phases of my career, I was given a lot. So basically my profile said consumer law expert, media law expert, and but not a family law expert. But in my first law firm, where I was actually, I was kind of working in Bombay, I saw that after 1 or 2 matters, I was not given a lot of consumer matters, but the family law matters were transferred to me for some or the other reason. After 1 or 2 months of working really hard, I kind of raised a question that why am I not getting the consumer matters? And I was told that maybe I will do family law matters better, as it involves a lot of empathy and it involves a lot of basically softer faces, female faces in family courts work better. So that was my first turning point where I felt that no, I think I can do way better in other fields as well. So this was initially, but I would love to talk more about the entertainment industry because presently I'm working as an actor in the television industry as well and OTT platforms. So I think that the recent situations where I'm facing this, because when I came from law to acting, I felt that, okay, artistic area is one where people are heard, people understand. So maybe that will be new people, new mindsets, and storytellers will be there, filmmakers will be there, and they'll be having a different perception to society. So maybe that will be my space. But believe me, the first ever audition I gave in a very big production house, and I remember that the brief of the character which the casting director gave me was, pardon me, but you have an artist on the panel, so I will behave in the same manner. How the casting director actually told me, मैडम एक रोल है and वो small town girl चाहिए है, simple looking. So I said, yeah, and I believe that I come from Bhopal, that's again a small town, and I think I'll do a great job. So I had gone for the audition, and I remember the creative director, the director, and the casting director was sitting. When I entered the room, they asked me what all you have done. I was telling them about my childhood theater experiences. And while I was telling them what all workshops I did while doing my job, what all workshop I used to go to learn acting on my weekends, someone in the middle of the conversation just says that, I think you're too intelligent for the role. And I was just thinking that since when are we connecting? When did intellect became the ground for disqualification of playing a small town girl? And I think I didn't understood because it was a new space for me. I walked out of the room and I was just thinking that whether acting industry will accept me, because they need, and all the casting requirements you see on the WhatsApp forwards, it's all, we are looking for a girl next door, certain looks, and at the same time, you don't fit in all of them. So currently, when I was offered, last year I was working as an independent media lawyer also. So I kept on auditioning. I did few good characters where there are few mindful filmmakers as well. So I was looking forward to something similar like that. Last year, I was offered this character of Geeta, which currently I'm playing on ZTV. And she's a magistrate, she's a strong-headed lady. But she will have, after 7 years of leave, she'll have a child, a girl child, 7 years old. And then the family drama begins. And that's where was my pause, that family drama meaning. So you are a strong, independent woman, but when the family drama begins, you become a mother who is in Hindi we say majboor for the child, and she's not able to take a stand. And at the end of it, she dies. So the question which arises in my mind is, do I really want to do this? Understanding that this might be a wrong reflection to the society, because television industry has reached places, people connect emotionally with the character, and also at the same time, being a lawyer who knows the right and the wrong, am I ready for this kind of a take? I had a discussion, I had a dialogue, and luckily the character started with the same narrative, but at the same time, there were few changes which were made eventually. But still, I also don't agree with a lot of things. So in my industry, I feel many a times during auditions, I faced the same. 5 days ago, I'm again briefed by one casting director about a character where they're again asking me to play a secretary of I think a CEO. And I'm asked to play it in a very subtle manner. I gave it my own shot, my own take. Working in a corporate in the past, I had an experience that if it's a woman and she's a secretary, I believe she'll be handling 100 things. She'll be on toes. And I actually gave a confident attempt to that audition. but it didn't get through, honestly. And when I asked for the feedback, I was told that she's a secretary. She has to be quiet. She can't be this confident. And I said, that's a wrong narrative. I don't think that what the secretaries I have seen, they are on toes. Maybe they're handling multiple things. They're multitaskers. So I think we should go ahead with this take. Please send it to the director, then we'll see. Believe me, he did send it, and I got a call from the director, and he says that, why are you having so much of discussion over the character? You're an actor, you're supposed to surrender to the scripts and to everything you do, and which I agree. But at the same time, if I have the chance to say it, I will. And I have been auditioned for another character, but not the secretary. So the brief remains the same. So yeah, these are few of the places where I feel that I have very distinctively and clearly felt that I am in the midst of a very misogynistic environment.
Okay, so reclaiming your own space, whether it's in the courtroom or the camera, wasn't easy. But you did it, and you did it powerfully, and it takes courage. So thanks for being courageous. Deepakshi, maybe know your views.
So, again, drawing in from personal experiences and how they shape your worldview, I think there are three distinct categories when I was, thinking about how do you really qualify. The first one really where I feel, and this is a very corporate-ish perspective, especially when you're growing through the ranks, right? You're probably 5 years of work experience, 10 years of work experience. Somewhere you're getting close to the middle layer, but you're still not where you can call the shots. I think the first bucket that I really look at as Professor Deepa is the invisibility of tasks, right? I remember I joined a fantastic technology major as somebody with about 10, 11 years of experience, and in your head, you're already, ready for the big world. This is your first big break. And the manager was like, okay, can you handle my credit card expenses? And I'm like, no. And you're like, but people are supposed to do that. And of course, because now this is also an American corporate, so he can't even say, but you are the woman in the team. So he's like, the younger person in the team typically, the more junior person in the team typically has to do it. And I'm like, okay, I get that. I'll do what it requires for the team, and I will do invoicing for the people that we are working with, because we are sponsoring those panels, I understand. But your credit card bills? No. And then he goes like, but this was a part of our engagement. And I went back to, okay, let's go back to the JD. And he realized that I'm not going to buckle in. Absolutely not going to buckle in. And he was like, oh my God, we will have to take this to the HR. And I'm like, oh, absolutely. Because by then, this time, I was also very, very clear we are now just playing to the gallery and see who blinks first. And I'm sure a lot of people who have worked, especially in the initial grind of the years, who takes the notes for a meeting? Typically a woman. Who will organize, okay, there's an event happening, why don't you really, be the organizer? A woman. And when you ask why, women are typically better organizers. When we look at the nurturers and the going back to the age-old philosophies, women are better organizers, and therefore, they are the ones who should take notes. They are the ones who should follow up with people when people have not really followed on with their tasks. And to be honest, and while I'm digressing, this is where technology and artificial intelligence is really going to make that difference, because you're going to spin out of that. Then the second larger form of misogyny, or at least I would say is the second larger bucket, if I were to go through the last 20, 21 years that I have worked, is people trying to take your decisions for you. And that is to say, yes, you are great, I'll give you all the credit for what you bring to the team, but just maybe, and then that follows, right? And two very specific examples. I got married about 11 years ago. And I get back to work, and this is high-pressure consulting environment. You have client deadlines you're chasing. You know you're going to pull an all-nighter at the office. And subtly, a teammate comes and is like, it's 9 p.m., you're married now. Do you want to go home? Because, Indian mother-in-laws and Indian Saas Bahu sagas, they feed that into you. And I'm like, well, thank you for the concern, but I can take my own decision. So why don't you not guide me on this? And the beauty of it, and I think I should mention it at this stage, that representation always helps. So when you have your mother, your mother-in-law, who are very sturdy professionals, I called my mom-in-law and I was like, I'm going to get late, probably 2 a.m. And she's like, of course, darling, work comes first. You guys have just come back after 4 weeks. And when I go home, there's a glass of mulled wine kept for me because of the biting Delhi winters, and it is addressed. When you talk about invisibility, an important part of invisibility also is, like you said, right? Beauty and brains don't go together. And again, why do you really need beauty, or for that matter, whatever form of your conceived beauty is for a meeting? We are entering a very important presentation with probably the most important person in the country at that time. And the night before, when we are closing out what our closing arguments are, how are we going to really make the presentation, it ends with, look pretty. And that was one time I was frozen, because I knew I have done the Herculean task of pulling this together. This is a person I share an excellent relationship with, somebody I look up to, and for him to end the conversation at look pretty, I was like, that's what you think I would do at, like, be sharp, bring your wit. There are a lot of gender agnostic ways you can ask your team to turn up, not look pretty. And the last one, and I will round it up at this, is very often I've realized that misogyny, or whichever form we look at it, it's also laced as concern. It's also laced as, oh no, but I'm invested in your growth. Oh no, I'm invested in your life. Life goes beyond work, right? And when I was pregnant with my first child, I was due for a promotion. And it was more like, I think we should get that conversation going after 4 to 6 months, right? You will have a very busy time. You need to be invested. And while I'll come to that later, but where that laced concern becomes very, very difficult to fight is, you also know that you need an ecosystem to thrive in the world. If you address that laced concern directly, you're probably pushing out the people who can be your best allies. And at the same point in time, you're like, but no, this is not what concern looks like. This is absolutely not what concern looks like. And I think for me, that breaking point where I was like, I am going to start doing something about it, was when I was pregnant. And again, late motherhood. I had my first child at 36. And that is where I was like, no, this is where the precedence for what I want to see my daughters live their life, it has to start with me. It has to be a lived experience. So, end up.
Absolutely. Bias often hides behind well-meaning words. And recognition is very often the first act of resistance. So yes, Professor Roberta, we would like to hear you.
Thank you. And first of all, thank you so much for the amazing hospitality of this place. Really honored to be here. So for me, I come from Italy, I live in the UK, and my husband is from Kerala. So in a way, I can bring a little bit of my multi-identities in one. But reflecting about misogyny, sexism in my career, I am an academic. I grew up academically in Rome, and I am from Naples, that is the south. That brings a lot of gender traditions and role, very similar to what you might experience here. At the beginning, it was very clear in my journey during my PhD and my early career that my male colleagues were given many more opportunities than me. Very, very clearly. Then you start reflecting about, it is about competencies. Maybe they are better than me. But then you start reflecting, well, I'm not sure about that. I have done my PhD also during, UCLA. I'm pretty specialized. So, but you start questioning yourself. It is about competencies. And they were given more opportunities. They were allowed to work on data. And data in academia is power, because if you have data and access to network, you have more chances of publishing your papers in good journals. And this matters for your career. And I guess here we can all resonate in the academic context. But then I want to point an attention to another things that I start to observe. And again, certain things are really, really subtle. And I started to realize that it was not just a male-female situation. Actually, some of my women, my female colleagues, they were getting opportunities. And then again, you start to understand, okay, there is something that it doesn't add up. So why I am in the category, I'm not just a woman, I am a woman or maybe another subgroup. And then you start reflecting about the expectation and the expectations about how a woman should behave. And it's about being agreeable. It is about being calm. I mean, in Italy, we are less calm than in other parts of the world, but definitely more settled, more quiet, and maybe pretty with high heels. Yeah, you can look at our prime minister in Italy. But I just wanted to mention the aspect about that there is another silent aspect that is about conform and being a certain type of woman. So what happened in my career at the beginning, so basically my senior prof, I was in a lab and access to data, network and everything. I was working on a paper and the person, he came to me saying, you should add this person, male colleague, to my paper as an author. And I said, I'm sorry, but doesn't sound right. I was protecting my own work. I am extremely ethical in whatever I do, and I wanted just to understand the rationale. The paper was already written, I did the analysis, I mean, it was already developed. So why I needed to add a male colleague in this paper? Now, you can anticipate that my reaction was not quiet, and I raised concern. I said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. It's not right. And we had a heated discussion. At the end, I managed to not have the male colleague in the paper, but this had an implications for my future collaboration. I was working on another paper, and here you have the battle of power, because he is the director of a lab. The data, I don't own the data, I'm part of a team. I was working on a paper, and he came to me and said, no, Roberta, you need to work on this other paper. I said, but why? There was no reasons. It was not a special issue. There was no time frame. And what I was explaining to him, this is a topic that it's not really relevant for my career path. It's not the same working on a topic A and on a topic B, because I need to think about my own career growth. And the end of the story was that he threatened me. He said, if you are not doing this paper, I'm not allowing you to do this other paper. You might guess what I did. I don't have neither of this paper out. I didn't work on neither of this paper. So the point to me that there are some aspects that requires principles, and I have tried my best to make a point about what is important, but this was also a way to actually connect with other people in my lab that then became my ally. Because I realized that it's not just about a battle or who raises the voice. I mean, we can be very loud in Italy, but it wasn't really trying to change the system. I realized it was not the right path. My right path was making choices that were aligned with me, but at the same time, strategically find a way to find my own way and become a prof and find my way. And my way was the power of competencies, because no one can take away my competence. And this other aspect to me, that was what I thought was the right things to do, was actually find allies. Because in academia, there are a lot of senior colleagues, male, females, that actually are not necessarily perpetrating the same narrative around how a woman should behave or who should be the right person for the job. Is actually qualities, we can discuss about who is actually the best fit for that role. And so I think, talking about my steps into recognizing misogyny, homosexism, it's really about, it's not just beliefs that we are or not are competent enough, but it's also about the actions that are actually taken that can affect your career and how you think about yourself.
Thank you. So culture has a lot of, in fact, has a big role to play here as we were listening to you. So misogyny survives not because people are evil, but because cultures reward looking away. So thank you, Roberta. And Deepti, we would like to hear from you.
Check. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for speaking about this and having this topic, but I want to assure you this is not a male bashing session. Right? And most conversations end up becoming that. And we were having a conversation earlier that sometimes in today's world, it's also very difficult to be a man, right? Do I be chivalrous? Do I help out? Do I not help out? What do I do? So we get that, but I think we're all talking from our experiences, lived experiences, and many of you are, brothers, partners, boyfriends, parents. So, when you all hear our journeys, I think having that lens is going to be important. I just thought I'll place that. I actually have the very good fortune of working with young boys, young girls, able-bodied, and athletes with disability. But very early on, prior to me coming into sports administration, I was actually a banker. I was with HSBC for 6 years, and straight out of campus, I got placed. And I still remember that we were 2 boys and 2 girls who got placed. It's campus placements, the company's there, your salaries are all available there. There can't be a really big difference, right? And the job profile was the same, the targets were the same. And finally, when we got our, offer letter, they were 2 different salaries for the man and for us. We're doing exactly the same job, the same target, right? And initially, I actually was like, oh, maybe it's the location, maybe, we get all this and HR has been told to do certain conversations in that way. But I still remember that, and it happens in many places, that we don't end up asking or having that conversation because you are considered difficult there. This new person has joined this job, so many questions, so difficult. Oh my God, why can't they're in such a reputed place. Why can't you just adjust, right? And this also comes from years of upbringing and training, and it's not just workplace, it's at home. A lot of us, all of us are a function of our values and growing up and what we've seen. And I truly believe you can't be what you can't see. So it's very, very important, and that many of us start talking about this openly and call it out. And maybe some of you have experienced it, maybe some of you have not experienced it, but I think just hearing 3/4 voice now, in some way, shape or form, we've constantly had this misogyny. Now, if I come to the sports world, let's talk about the very recent event of the Women's Cricket World Cup, right? Let's cheer for them first. It's a gentleman's game. It's a boys' game. Who watches women's cricket? Who's going to fill the stadiums and watch it? And for almost 2 decades, there have been women who played women's cricket without actually being under the banner of BCCI, which is the official federation, right? And then it came in, and then you talk about equal pay, you talk about opportunities, you talk about competitions, none of it. So why this is a watershed moment for Indian sport is because each and every of this young girl who's made it to the team comes from the smallest and remotest parts of India, and many of them were told, you cannot play cricket because cricket is not for girls, right? And if you go back, they were all allies in their parents. Everyone who made it there was a coach who supported them, a friend who supported them, a partner who supported them, or a school who supported them, and maybe now organizations like us who support them. So in sport, you don't know whether you're going to go win that medal or you're going to actually go and win, because sport is so brutal and sport is so cruel that I played sport myself, but at some point I realized I'm not at an international level. I played for state, and you have to, then your parents sit down and have the chat saying, so what are you going to do in life, right? You have to be independent. And independent means you cannot keep playing sport because there is no money in sport. At least 2 decades back, there was no funds. So that is really from an athlete standpoint. But as a sports administrator, I remember when I was in the bank, I was actually one of the youngest vice presidents in retail banking. And banking has very fancy designations. So when I chose to move out and go sports, one of the first things was, why don't you do this as volunteering? Why don't you volunteer? The minute you say NGO, then it means, you volunteer. You don't need to change your whole course of your life and move into it. And when I remember my first meeting, because I do a lot of meetings with the government, with the coaches. I was probably 26, 27 at that point of time, and I walked into a room, and most rooms are only filled with men. And if you're a younger woman, you're just assumed, they just assume then, acha, kyun aaye ho beta? Beta? Kyun aaye ho? And you're like, I represent this organization, I'm here. And I just felt the last 13 years was just about showing up and sitting there and saying, I will not move. Right? And because there are enough and more people to constantly make you feel small. Why are you here? Why do you want to be here? This is not a place for women, right? Aap coaching kar lo, aap kuch aur kar lo. Now physiotherapy, nutrition kar lo. That's a new thing, na? Nutrition kar lo. All, everything women related. But today you have sports engineers, sports analysts, sports, everybody who can be either men or women. At the end of the day, we want our team to win, and we want to hear the national anthem play at every stadium in the world. So as long as you bring in that, piece would be great. So for me, just coming back, it's there in buckets and pockets. You have to be able to stand your ground. It's very awkward. It's a very uncomfortable, unsettling feeling. I'm sure we've all felt it at multiple points. It could just be a statement. It could be, अच्छा आपको कुछ और काम नहीं है तो आप बैठ जाइए, right? But you're actually trying to do something big. You're trying to stand for something. And athletes see this in entries. You see this in इसको क्या करना है वो anyway. They're not going to win, and we've all seen Chak De and enjoyed it, right? Those are all true situations where when a young girl is actually playing sport, she's not just trying to win that medal, but really trying to break the stereotype and really come out of her space and stand as a role model for the community. So I think personally, that has been, it's been an amazing experience, but calling it out took some time, I would say. because you have to also kind of know what you bring to the table. And I just feel consistency, discipline, and showing up. That's what sport taught me. And I try to bring the same thing back in.
Yes, that fine line between composure and complicity. We are told to stay calm when what's needed is courage. So the paradox, being praised and patronized at the same time, is the root of this conversation. And what's striking is that misogyny wears different uniforms, but survives through silence. And once it's named, it begins to lose power. That's what we're talking about, to call out or maybe to show up. So let's talk about what happens next, how we challenge it. So, silence cannot be our response. We've just talked about it. When we don't call it out the first time, the behavior becomes acceptable, normalized. Recognizing bias is one thing and challenging it is another. Each one of us has pushed back in our own way, through systems, through voice, through solidarity, through allyship. So let me ask you, how did you respond when you saw or experienced misogyny in your world? Like, once you recognized it, what levers did you actually use to challenge it? Was it policy, solidarity, visibility, or quiet persistence? What worked? What did not? And how did your field's culture shape the way you confronted it? We again begin with Titiksha.
Coming back to the same point where you ended, I also believe that men play a huge role here, because many a times it's unconscious bias which has been, we are accustomed with, it is kind of, we are conditioned with. So many a times when I have raised a voice, initially, sometimes I have lost roles, sometimes I have kind of be giving such a good audition, I've been rejected. And at the same time, even in the legal field, if I say, a lot of matters were taken away from me initially. But slowly and gradually, I realized that when you speak in the same dialect of this specific industry, you are heard a bit louder, I feel. So with respect to the legal field, I believe that I used the same tools. Equality, fairness. I tried my best to be super prepared beforehand. I had to apply a little extra mind to it. And that's how I navigated my way out. But with respect to entertainment industry, being an actor, I felt that there is a huge, huge challenge, because what I've learned in working in both these professions is that art transforms faster than the law can legislate. This is one tagline which I always use wherever I am able to express the same. So I believe that when I came into the acting industry, everything was so much, even in appreciations, as we were talking about invisibility. So someone will be appreciating me, but at the same time, I'll be feeling a little awkward about it, because I'm talking about my my craft, my acting styles I have learned, or what I can deliver to this character, or maybe this is what I'm perceiving with a certain character brief. And someone will tell me that, I think you should smile more towards the camera while interviewing, you look better. Or maybe something like, I think your look will fit in this particular role better. So from there, what I realized was, I will give you a very recent example of this character again, Geeta, because it's a very recent character which I'm playing. So this show on ZTV, they wanted a comeback of this character in the show, as how television works, the drama works in television. So they wanted this character back, and the leap was of 12 years. So now this lady who was 30, now she's 42. So they were very, initially, and it was a positive character initially. and they wanted a comeback in a negative shade. Now, what negative shade? I question, but now I've understood how to question it. So I questioned it in their same language. That's very interesting to know that she'll be coming in a negative shade. But I think, what kind of negative character will this be? I would love to play something very different from what I have played in the past. So then the first thing he comes up with, of course, the briefing. They're all very learned people I'm working with. And what they briefed me was, let's see, when you flip an emotion, how a woman, you tell me how a woman will react if she's faced a lot of battles in her life and she's coming back and now she's lost her mind. So how will she react? She's a lawful woman, but now she's not taking the lawful steps. Now she's taking all the wrong steps to reach the desired goal. But the initial intention is right, that she's a mother. So now, after this, the first question they asked me was whether you are comfortable playing a 42-year-old. So on that, my question was, so I have already played a mother of a 7-year-old without being one, without being married, and I'm an actor. I think I'll pull it off. So then they were like, of course, there were other people around the corner who asked me that, your face is very soft. Will you be able to play negative? So there were so many questions around, and I believe that because of these questions which were popping up after the discussion we have had of the comeback, I decided to do this character. And I decided to come up in front, and when the interviews happened, every person interviewing from the biggest of channels, female journalists coming and asking me, why did you choose this role? Being such a young actor, you're playing an old actor, now you'll be stereotyped, you'll not get many roles ahead. And I just said the same thing. Why do you think that this is the only way to stereotype a woman? Can't you see someone in India? In India, it's very common. Women, they marry at 20, 21. They become mothers at 20, 25. And at the same time, they also become CEOs, entrepreneurs at the age of 30, having it all. So why not I set a new narrative, or maybe do something which sets an example? Now, on the other hand, the interviewers never questioned the other male actor in the same show who is 40 years old in his real life and playing a 24-year-old. Nobody asks him, how are you feeling playing a younger character? How are you feeling playing a college boy at the age of 40? But to me, all the questions were the same. And I think that was the platform which I took an opportunity to bring those thoughts in a very formalized way and to reach out to many people, and also giving some kind of motivation around, I feel so, to the other female co-actresses to kind of take up such kind of roles, choosing empowered roles, choosing roles which are redefining the narratives. And I think we all can do that. The best part is that I can rely on my other profession. So I don't have, because majorly actors in my industry, they kind of take up everything because that's their bread and butter. And they surrender themselves to the job. But we don't realize that the art form, films, television, this reaches faster to the audience. I'm sure everybody sitting here is watching OTT platforms, Netflix, Amazon Prime, a lot of content here and there. And we learn a lot from these content. We learn about society. And now because OTTs have been so mindfully, they are driven, that they research on the topics and then they make web series and other concepts that we kind of learn from them. So we can use this as a tool. Like apart from, it has a huge commerce involved, but my purpose and my agenda now has become that I choose certain characters, I question, and I take that kind of risk to set a new perspective with respect to how you are portraying women on screen. So yeah, I think I'm still figuring my way out, and to some extent, this has become my journey and my patterns to kind of interact with the people in my legal field and as well as acting. Yeah, thank you.
So I could actually sense storytelling and expression becoming activism in motion. Yes. So Dipakshi?
So, on addressing these things, and I would say, as you grow up the pyramid, you also realize, like you rightly mentioned, right? There's a lot of burden on representing what you want your peers, your next generation, even the larger world to kind of take from it. A few strategies that I typically deploy to this, and this has come after a lot of, it's taken time to build that as a muscle. The first one really is label how that makes you feel. Till such time that I have been okay with it, just because, you know, you grow up with certain conditioning, you go to a college with certain conditioning. The first very important part is, all right, it's making me feel uncomfortable, but why? Can I label it for myself? If I can label it for myself, then perhaps I can go build a stronger argument on why I want, and again, it impacts me, but is it something I can change? I cannot change. If I can change, I might do it. If I cannot change, go have a dialogue, right? And having that dialogue, typically, and again, you know, like you mentioned, a lot of it is conditioning. I'm lucky to have grown up in a progressive environment where there were no differentiators. If my cutoff to get back home was 11 p.m., so was my brother's. It was not that, okay, you can come back at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m., but you have to be home by 10 p.m. But how that conditioning helps is, you know that you can raise issues, you know that you have a safety net, that lets you have an open dialogue. And something, and my mother is there in the audience, and something I've learned from her, and I deploy it very, very often and very, very actively, is always start with the assumption that the other person does not mean bad. Start with the assumption that probably, like I said, you know, laced concern, probably this person is coming in from a space of concern. It is just that the manifestation of it is very different. It's misogynistic, right? And I'll go back to the same example that I was quoting in the last intervention. Then this manager who was very concerned about that, you know, now that you're pregnant, we will have to make changes to these 4-6 months here and there. And he continues to be one person I really look up to, and this conversation is already 4-5 years ago. And I was like, okay, you have a daughter who's 12. Do you think that she's going to step back whenever she becomes a parent? Because I am not feeling comfortable about this interaction. And he was like, no, but see, I am not speaking with you just as a woman. I'm speaking with you from the lens. There are stages in life where you might want to prioritize one part of it. Maybe you want to prioritize motherhood here. And I'm like, but then that would be my decision, right? That is not your decision. I'm happy to have that conversation with you. But it is going to be my decision, my husband's decision, a co-opted decision on how we do this. A big success, but we were able to move that conversation from there to, no, but you and I are on the same side. What we are talking about is we need to fight the other senior representation in the country who will have the mindset that now she will not show up. And I'm like, now we are talking. Because now immediately I know you are the mentor because you have seen this play out. Guide me, help me, champion me when I'm not in the room. To something very, I would say, interesting that happens through the process, right? And I think that is what this panel also does. You end up building your tribe. You end up creating representation where there was perhaps no precedence of sorts. Again, just a quoted example, and I love to, and I'm very, very proud of sharing this when I quote this example. It's very often, and this is common research, right? If there's a job description, if women don't meet 6 out of 10 pointers, they will not apply. If they don't meet 10 out of 10 parameters, they wouldn't apply. And typically, similar thing, but a male candidate for the same very ambitious job will keep that sliver that, all right, I just meet 7, the other 3 I can learn on the job. I tried to use it. When I was at Dell, to the move that I was making at Intel. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to make a big leap. This is a country leadership, functional leadership position. I am not equipped. I don't have these many number of years. I don't have this representation. I'm like, all right, worst comes to worst, they will reject. Big deal, that's a part of it. I will still go through the process. But I was like, but at that point in time, I was pregnant with my second child, and I'm already 6.5 months pregnant. So I'm like, I will never know whether I did not get that job because I was not meritorious enough or because I was pregnant. So initially, I didn't tell them anything about pregnancy. Thanks to COVID, all the interviews were just video calls. And by the time I realized, all right, 6th, 7th, 8th round, I'm like, this is now getting serious. I need to tell them. And I set up a conversation with the hiring manager. I'm like, you know what? I'm 7 months pregnant. And her first reaction, and I think that is what I would want to give to everybody, oh my God, that's amazing, congratulations. And which means that if you get this role, we need to close out on the hiring formalities ASAP. And I was like, okay, this happens. This is happening. You're questioning status quo. For that matter, when I shared with industry colleagues that I'm shifting, including women who mean very well, this is going to be so difficult. You have spent 8 years at your last place. You have that ecosystem built. Why do you want to shake it up when you're going to have an infant? And kudos to my manager, actually, till date, my manager, Sarah Kemp, who was like, no, and just remember you have to pay it forward. You're going to go for 6 months maternity. Yes, we will do that with a lot of pride. And to the last point, and I'll close this here again, is something which we all need to really address as senior, or I wouldn't even say senior, but people who are now writing or rewriting the game, is there is also this perceived conversation always around the queen bee syndrome, that there would be one woman leader who has to be there in the boardroom. There has to be one woman leader. If there are two, they will get into a catfight. Why? And again, that is something I've realized, just because it is conditioned so much, it is also up to those peers to really champion back each other. So when I was joining the company I'm at, so many people, oh, you know, there's this other person there who's very, very assertive. She will not let you take her place at all. And I'm like, but I'm there to carve my own. And something that I always would credit her for saying, and she was like, you know, you can only share feedback when there's trust. And that trust would only come when there's allyship. And that allyship would only come when you see those representations at a larger scale. So, and I'll stop at that.
Okay, thank you. So label for yourself, have a dialogue. Thank you. Roberta.
So again, I already, in a way, anticipated before that my way out, in a way, was not a direct confrontation, or not always a direct confrontation, but was a more strategic approach, in which you start thinking about, okay, let me read, and this resonates with what you were saying. You need to understand the context, because if you are not understanding the context, you are actually putting yourself not in a position of advantage, because you are missing certain points. And I have to say that an important mentor in this regard was actually a male professor, because he was helping me navigating and understanding the context. And especially when you don't actually know much about the context, you are young, you are full of passion, but you're also very much frustrated because you want to do and yet you are not allowed. And when your decision latitude is very, very small, you don't have autonomy. And also, you don't have opportunity to grow, because as much as we want, at least in our field, you need, to work with other people. It's not a solitary, pathway. And so it has been alliance. It has been helping also understanding the context. But at the same time, and this might be I also decided to change country. And I have to say that my decisions were not because I was not tenured. I was tenured. But to me, I was feeling that was not the right place for me. And I have to say, I found an incredible, there was a big difference by moving from one country to another, from Italy to the UK. I'm not saying that in the UK there are no biases or there are no problems. That is not the point. But there was a moment in which I actually felt that it was a different stage of my life in which I wanted to have a voice and create a space for inclusion, for role modeling in a place that was welcoming me. Because this is another point about how much you feel welcomed to actually be you. And I'm extremely lucky because this is my second workplace in the UK, and I think for the very first time that I can be me. Sometimes I have to play a little bit and say, oh, I'm so sorry to be so Italian, but I am using it in a very strategic way. And again, it's not necessarily about gender, it's about race, it's about religion. It is a compound of elements in our identities. And so in certain contexts, you might find it's more gender. In other contexts, it's about being woman, Italian, or who knows, whatever I bring in my plate. So I think that there is an element about definitely the being able to read the context. And I agree that it is a matter of not necessarily thinking that your perpetrator is intentionally against you, is relabeling, as, you know, not as a victim, but actually as part of a system. Because misogyny is a systemic element, it's not necessarily an individual characteristics, it's not about a bad individual. And again, I do research in this area, not in misogyny, but in understanding perpetration. So there is this element, there is the element of finding the right people to work with, and is also having the strength to say, I can take another path, and I give myself the opportunity. And again, in the Italian context, I have been labeled as a crazy individual to leave my uni, my tenure, to start as an ECR, so I started at an early career, without feeling bad, because it's a title, it's not defining me. But it's an interesting point about believing in yourself, but also knowing when you need to open a different door and walk away. I think this is also a part, at least in my pathway.
Yeah.
And I need to leave.
Yes, so transformation begins as a deeply personal decision, and that's what you did. Roberta would like to excuse herself. She has a flight to catch, so thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Have a safe flight. Deepti, may we hear you?
I think it's a combination of what we all spoke about in terms of allyship, being your authentic self, speaking up. I think many times what we don't end up doing is, oh my God, if I speak now, I'm going to get labeled as this difficult person, right? And most of the times, you know, I have this one example of a colleague of mine who worked with me for many years in the sports foundation. She comes from a big joint family. And she was incredible. I mean, she is incredible in terms of the work she does, her ideas, her presentations. And there have been many times where I have said, you know, you come and present. And we would come, we would set up the, you know, in the boardroom, get everything ready. She's done half the work. She's done 90% of the work. She should be standing there and actually doing the presentation. And just when we start, she'd come to me and say, I can't do this. I just can't do this. And then obviously someone has to present. So then either me or a colleague or someone come in. And this happened 2-3 times. And so, you know, I took her out one day and I was like, what is it? What is happening? You need to get this credit. You need to be out there speaking. She's like, Iti, my whole life I have been told to look pretty and listen. So when you put me in a room like this, in front of 10 people staring at me, I don't know how to speak. So there are so many, and I'm so sure there are so many young girls and women across many, many generations who are not able to articulate many things because of this conditioning. But today, I'm very happy to say she's also done her TED Talk. She's out there. It takes some time, but allyship doesn't just rest with men. I think it's with us as women. And even in the smallest of gestures. So I have, again, another rule in office which I noticed was every time there was a birthday, person whose birthday it was would cut the cake. And suddenly all the men would go and the women would cut the cake and start serving it. I'm like, it's your birthday, first of all, come and cut the cake. And you can serve. I mean, what is the harm? And it's not because you don't want to do it. You've just seen that in my house, my mother will, or my grandmother will cut the cake and then stand and serve and give. But today, it's not an issue in our office. They know if it's your birthday, you please do it. So it's in the micro day-to-day moments which we can make these changes. You can't suddenly show up in a big place, in a big presentation, in a big setup, and suddenly do things you've never done. So allyship for me really starts with us. And I think we've been told through all this Saas and Bahu story, sorry, with no thing to you, that you have to hate this person. And that person will hate you. And, we've created this enemy-like war front which is not required. And that's why today, when a mother-in-law or a daughter-in-law are having a great time, you're like, oh, they're so lucky, right? It's just not normalized. And I think the more normal we make these relationships, that's going to be really special. And also in terms of, I see this in sport, where, the guru-shishya concept is very, 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 it's happening for years. And a lot of times, the coach has been with a particular young boy or girl for many years. And literally, they've given their whole life. Sometimes they don't even have time for their own family and children, but they've given it to these athletes because they know this person can make it to the Olympics. This person. So there is this sense of, you're indebted to me forever. So you don't have a voice. You cannot speak. You know what is happening is not okay. And when you are 8 and when you are 18 or 28, you have seen the world very differently. You're going to call out things which, when you were 8, it didn't matter, right? So, I mean, we keep reading this in a lot of papers, and we are trying to put in a lot of policies. Policies is another very important thing because, again, when you talk about posh, it's in corporate workplace. But posh as a concept has not come into sports still, right? And it's there in hostels, but it is not a properly governed system. So I think policy, allyship, women, colleagues, it's not leadership. Your leadership just cannot come and say, this is how we are. And I think that's where we go wrong many times, that my company will do this, my leaders will tell me this, the head of the organization will come and put the system. But if we all don't do it on a day-to-day basis, whether it's calling out or whether it's supporting, it's going to take a really, really long time to change. And I think today we keep speaking about the Gen Alpha, Gen Z, right? And very recently, someone asked me, so how old do you think a Gen Z is? And for whatever reason, I just said, maybe early 20s. And they're like, no, they're going to be 30, right? And you just have this assumption that, no, they're really young. But they are the future leaders. And the way I think the Gen Zs are looking at equality and equity is actually very special. And kudos to, the younger generation for calling it out and taking those steps and treating each other equally. Schools are playing a big part in it. Sport is an equalizer, but we see this even on again, a very small example that just happened over the weekend. There was a small football clinic happening in a school, and there were young boys and young girls of 5 and 6 years old playing. And the minute they said, okay, now we'll play a small match, they were divided into boys and girls, right? They're training together, they're playing together, they're of the same height. In fact, the women are slightly bigger than the boys at 8, 9. So this one little girl came and said, but why am I playing there in the side court and why are these boys playing here? So it's that small where, so the teacher said, you know what, let's just mix it up. But someone has to be there to keep calling it out, because you can say, okay, next time I will do it. That next time will not come. And then the next time, you're just going to be like, you know, that last time I played here only, we girls only played, so it's fine. I'm not saying boys and girls have to play equal sport, but when you're learning sport, you're learning and training together, it doesn't matter, right? There is a lot of talk on why is chess and, you know, there is no gender. Why is there gender? You're not moving physically. So there's a lot of research being done overall globally on all these elements, but I think for us, on a day-to-day basis, allyship, calling it out, and putting in those systems and processes where you're not punished or looked down upon for bringing up an issue. And I think most of the time, we bring up issues by making a big scene. You don't need to do that. We can be very subtle. I don't mean quiet, subtle silence. I just mean handling it with grace, but making sure there is a change, and that follow-up to the change is on us. Just making an issue, putting it on social media, making a big hoo-ha of it with zero solutions, usually is where it's creating a lot of problem. But trying to sit down, reason out, mediate the problem, and bring a solution, and then bring back everyone and say, this is something we will do and this is something we will not do going forward. I think that closure never happens and everyone understands it the same way. So I think usually in sport, we kind of do a debrief after every match. So it's a pattern that we've learned growing up, to debrief after a problem comes up. It's helped me and the organization many times. So I love debriefing, and after an event, after anything, they'll be like, oh, debrief time. And anybody can say whatever it is, right? So it gives you a very open platform to share your views. You may agree, you may disagree. And most of the times you'll agree to disagree. You may not come up with a solution. But I think having the ability and not the ego to say, hey, that is a perspective, and we can't change how someone felt. So yeah, that's really combination of my experiences and how we can go ahead.
Right. It's a combination of grit and determination, reason out, mediate, and closure. So we move to the last question, after which we'll open the house for a couple of questions, keeping the time in mind. Let's look forward now, from resistance to redesign to transformation. So looking back, what does transformation mean to you now? Have you seen real shifts in leadership, behavior, policy, or daily culture that gives you hope that for what workplaces can become? Titiksha.
I believe that with my own personal experience of both the industries, what recently which I have experienced is, and when I was kind of invited for the panel by ma'am, I got into thinking. And that was the time when I realized that, yeah, we have come a long way to some extent. There is a lot which has improved, but how? So that I started to think how, and I realized that I think empathy plays a lot big role. Once you understand that this is the problem which exists, and it's a cultural conditioning. It's not something which needs to be, always, what to say, jiske liye morcha nikala jaye har baar. It's more of when you, as you rightly said, a dialogue, very important. How you put it, how you make someone aware of it, that really had shifted. So as I said, once I agreed to make a comeback in a negative shade and kind of try to break certain perspective, that time I realized that the creatives started to sit with me and discuss that this is our next track. Do you have any contributions on the same, which we can bring up to the character? And I think it all happened because the way we had led the initial conversation with maturity and at the same time raising the right questions. So that was, again, the dialogue played an important role. Secondly, when you put some empathy towards any discussion where you rightly said that we know men. See, it's not your fault. It's just that maybe you're not aware of it because you haven't seen it. Recently, when like some months ago, one of my co-actors, he was just having a casual discussion with me. He was, of course, male co-actor. And he just asked me that, oh, so you have practiced law and everything, and then why have you come in this unstable career? And and in the flow of the moment, he just started discussing that, and now it will be the age for marriage also. If you get into some good television which works like Anupama and it goes for years and years, so how will you get time for getting married? Will they give you leaves? And I was like, where did this come from? Then I realized that, okay, maybe that's what he has seen around him, and he's trying to know my perspective. So let me talk to him in his own language. So I kind of smiled because obviously it was initially funny for me. But then in a very funny way, I told him that, see, I am a lawyer. I can, in a day's time, I can go do a court marriage, come back, start shooting, and whenever I have time, I can go and have a destination wedding as well. So this is how I will manage my... so I don't know what happened, that dialogue, maybe he kind of realized that I am saying something to make him realize. The other day, like after 2-3 days, we had scenes together. So he came to me and randomly he said that, I think I asked the wrong question. I'm really sorry if you didn't, I hope you didn't mind. So I said that we had a great laugh after that conversation. You think I would mind, but great that you gave it a thought. So that was one moment. And then, of course, I feel that even in the legal field, so I would take this opportunity and this place to inform you all that very silently I started an initiative. I thought that when I have knowledge of law, and I am in the entertainment biz, and most of my co-actor friends, they keep on asking me about some of the other legal stuff, that this contract I have to sign with this particular production house, and if I question any of the clauses, that this is, please at least extend my pay scale, or maybe extend my number, decrease my number of hours of shoot. So I think they will take someone else, and they will not take me as an actor. So I keep used to guiding them, and so I thought that why not to... what else can I do? Because I can't always argue. If I'm a lawyer, doesn't mean that everywhere I'll go and argue. So what else can I do to actually contribute something which helps a lot of people? So I started an initiative called Aapki Legal Dost. So it sounds very friendly. So this was my venture. It's still working. Of course, I work very silently on it. I promote it, but only to the specific areas. And when I started that initiative is for all the individual artists, actors, individual filmmakers, producers, musicians who are starting in the industry, and they all are facing it. It's not only for women, for everybody. But believe me, in the month's time of actually circulating it in the industry, there were maximum of the females who reached out to me and asked me about contractual, of course, the contractual queries. And at the same time, the biggest query was when they're offered something inappropriate, or maybe they are asked that whether you can do bold scenes or not. They are casted, and after that, they are put on a situation where when they have already signed the contract, they are in the project, and now they have no other option but to do the particular role. So when I started handling those matters silently, I realized that the way you write emails, the way you communicate, it has a huge difference. So I started training them to send, so basically make a conversation in the right way possible. Do not conversate on WhatsApp or WhatsApp calls. Send them professional emails. Let them know that you are a professional and you know the right and the wrong. So I think transformation begins when we stop asking for our space. It always will begin when we start to expand the dimensions, and we kind of put something extra we have. So I believe that empathy plays one important role, dialect, as you rightly said. And of course, let's not ask for spaces. and kind of give dimensions to it. So I think that's my best way possible I can have.
Thank you. So owning your narrative is the purest form of transformation, isn't it? Yes, Deepakshi?
So I think a lot has transformed, but it's a work in progress, and there are many things that we don't know, which will evolve with finer dialogue. And it's not just women; it's people with any diverse needs, whether it is neurodiversity, whether it is just identity diversity. But one important change that I see, especially in the corporate world, and I purely speak about the organized markets here, is the focus on governance. So it's one thing to say that, all right, and every big corporation today would have a 2030 goal, which has now become a 2040 goal, where they talk about that, okay, by 2030, 50% of our people managers will be women. Right? We will ensure that there is going to be diversity. It's not just about diversity, it's also about inclusion. Many narratives have already evolved from diversity and inclusion to now also equity in opportunities, if not just equality in opportunities. And why I say governance, and why I'm linking governance with these goals, is many responsible firms also track their performance on these goals, and they publish these metrics year on year. I think when we talk about policy making, one of the most important inputs into policy making is the evidence that goes behind it. It is these conversations that add that evidence, that add that gravitas to the conversation, if you may. The second thing, and you would see, and India is actually the flag bearer here in a lot of cases. I don't know how many of us in the room went through the data protection policy that has just been recently enshrined. Anybody here who has gone through it? If you have anything very particular, specifically about the gender that came out, that stood out for you. They have only used the pronoun she. They don't talk about a he. And that was, while growing up, that was a big concern I had. Why is everything a he and why is it not a... And then came the she or he, and then it was like, okay, it can be they, it can be it can be he or she, but pronouns matter. And equally important, and this is where what safe spaces do to you, you can raise these questions. I sit on governing council of one of the trade bodies, and I was like, the charter says chairman, 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 the chair and he and her, and I'm like, but you have 4 women out of the 10 people who are there, please address the pronoun. So pronouns help you be seen. They very silently, they're not even policy really, but very subtly they let you know that you exist, you matter. One thing, again and again, this is very specific to policy making and not just at a governmental level, but even at an organizational level, is how do you systematically look into what is the invisible element on gendered dynamics that you need to address? And can you bring that? And again, that cannot happen without the representation or a multi-factored representation that you bring into the room, right? Like you said at the beginning, Professor Sethi, diversity often becomes a check mark. It takes a very conscious effort to move that check mark to why did we really have a diverse representation. And that only happens when you wear different hats and you try to argue from both the sides, at times 4 sides of the table, to say, this is missing, this needs to be addressed, let's see, I will champion it. I think every cause needs a champion, and we should not really shrink to the corners when we talk about this. And something I learned, and to your point, right, when we talk about women, or for that matter, allyship, and the fact that allyship can come from any quarters, and this was a very personal, deep learning. And this is not long time ago, but about 10 years ago, I was in a leadership course. And it was also, you realize the importance of focus groups and, kinship. And a lot of women were like, meko ghar jaake khana bhi banana padta hai. I am the one who takes care of the elderly. I am the one who takes care of women. And I come from a very equal household where my husband probably shares more than, I can't even say it's a 50-50. He actually does most of the things, right from the kids to what's getting cooked, to his work, to ensuring that I don't lack. So I was like, why is everybody just talking like a victim? It was a 3-day behavioral camp, and at the end of the 3rd day, I was like, who am I to label what they're going through? If I have to be a good leader, I need to meet people where they are with the realities that they have. I might not have lived through that reality, But that does not put me in a status where I question somebody else's reality and say, you know what, you're playing a victim card. That person might just be coming from a level of a lived experience. You need to honor that. So, yes.
Embedding inclusion into governance structures does make transformation systemic. We would like to hear you, Deepti.
I think there have been significant strides that we've taken. I think when you speak about sports administration, you'd never actually have many women who you'd know of who does sports administration, whether you go back to any sort of Olympics or Commonwealth Games when Delhi hosted it. You never had women at the helm of it. There have been incredible women in Indian sport who've come to a certain level but never really led anything as an organization. So, a decade ago when I got into, Go Sports and started initially as an executive director and then moved up. And then when I was called executive director, and in India, executive director is, okay, to aapka boss kaun hai? Nobody understands. Executive director in other countries is the head of the organization, right? So at that point, because sometimes you don't really use the word CEO in a non-profit setup, but it had become so important to tell them that, hey, I am the boss here. I have a board, I have trustees, but the day-to-day executive management is run by me. So I think I was one of the first few, CEOs, and then you start getting called women CEO. Like, okay, you've just crossed one battle and you've become the CEO, but then, you're the woman CEO. So I think, I'm taking that with a pinch of salt, but you have to call it out again, and you have to, you're seeing that change. And I'm very happy to share that today there are more than 10 to 12 different organizations being run and led in sport by women. So I think that's a big change. And we're seeing a lot of athletes who've been Olympians, who've come back into sports administration, who've come back to lead. Because most of the time, when you don't end up doing too well in sport, you're forgotten. And all these life skills that you've built just go down the drain. But today, India has just placed its bid to host the 2036 Olympics, and by virtue of that, we also get the Paralympics. We've just won the bid to do the Commonwealth Games. So there's going to be a huge opportunity in the world of sport, and we will need everyone, right? So I think transformation is coming, transformation is seen. You just need to stay at it, be disciplined, show up. And a quote that Abhinav Bindra always uses, and he's India's first Olympic gold medalist, and he says, it's not every 4 years, it's every day. So you have to be there every day, you have to show up, you have to have the discipline, and that's what takes everyone together.
So as we sum up, and we have time only for one question. So misogyny is not a gender issue. That's what we were discussing. It's a power issue. And power, when unchecked, becomes culture. And that's where the issue lies. So may we have 1 or 2 questions, please? Professor Kamal Kishore Sharma.
Yeah, I was intrigued with the Women's World Cup. When it came out, I just noticed that there in BCCI, there is no woman administrator. And this cricket is a sport which is like, it's not different in any rule when it is applied on women cricket. Then when I saw a little deeper, Women Premier League, women cricket team, there are women over there. But is that cricket different than this men cricket? I could not, except Diana, I guess she was COA, in the COA some point of time. But what's this? And what's brewing there?
You're putting me on the spot. But, it's actually interesting. Many federations till very recently never had a woman. And if you go back to Olympic history in India, women have actually won more medals in the last 4 cycles. In fact, in 2016, you had Sakshi and Sindhu who won. There were nobody else who won, right? So there is also an ROI and case study being drawn on, when you fund women, they not just are being athletes, they're role models, they help the community, and they're great administrators. I think the commercial aspect was not really evaluated so much. And a lot of times, and this is not just with a federation or BCCI, I think when you look at administration, you're only thinking about, I have to book the hotel, I have to book the bus, I have to do logistics. You see administration in a lens of logistics and not really being there, being an entourage, providing the support, doing all of that. I think it's going to change because even the current World Cup team, while there was no one in the administrative team at BCCI, if you saw the entire team, the doctor was a female former athlete. You had physios, trainers, a lot of them, and it was a mixed team based on merit. Until through the national sports policy, unless it gets mandated, which is now mandated, you have to have a woman in certain roles. It's not it's so obvious, right, to actually have, it's not different form of cricket, but I think what we think administration is very, very different. Even if you see this, you all would have seen the Star Sports ad that was going around. I mean, it was this young couple where the wife keeps the t-shirt of Smriti Mandana for the husband to wear. And he's feeling very awkward initially to wear it. And then he walks out of the house and everybody, he sees the watchman, he sees his colleagues, he thinks that he's actually wearing a jacket and then he removes it. So I think, like I say, if you don't see, you don't be, because you don't want to be the first person doing many things. And that's because of courage. And we spoke about that, right? To just come out and say, you know what, I don't care if you don't care, but I want to flaunt this. So we need to take that pride that we bring a certain element. And sport is always considered as it's for men, even though women are playing. And this is not an India problem. Even globally, you'll have more men administrators than women. In fact, we have more coaches who are women globally, but very less female coaches over here. So I think it is a cycle. We're changing. We're talking about transformation, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot more change, hopefully, with this one big win as well. That's, so we actually did a research. Maybe I'll pass it on to Professor Deepa and she can share it with everyone. So about 5 years ago, we did something called as the Equal Hue Survey. Because as Go Sports, we used to only support athletes in Olympic, Paralympic sport. We never did cricket. But then when we did this research in women's cricket, we realized they're going through the same challenges that other sports are going through. And we spoke to about 350 young women cricketers and put this survey out. So it is very interesting. From there, we called it equal pay, equal hue, the hues of being equal. And now to see this kind of result is very interesting, because over there, the challenges were very similar. I don't have an administrator. I don't know who to speak to. Who do I share this problem with? And in sport, you also have things like menstruation, mental health, a lot of things which you don't want to discuss with your male administrator, because it's a ladkiyo wala problem, right? And that's a separate discussion altogether on what all we hear. But we're getting better. I think there's a lot of hope. These young boys and girls who, why we do what we do is really to create role models for India so that they can go and, inspire a whole new generation going forward. So let's hope that happens.
Thank you, Deepti. We are short of time. So a big round of applause for the panelists. And may I request the director to give a concluding remark. You sat through the panel, and I know you have a lot to say. So,
supposed to give away all those beautiful trophies. one thing you realize from this conversation that women are so much more articulate than men can ever be on issues such as these. You know, I remember Mrs. Indira Gandhi when she entered Parliament, and she wasn't speaking much in Parliament. She was termed Gungi Guriya, dumb doll. And then when she became what she became, she was called the only man in the cabinet. So from dumb despair to delirious devotion. Men are very emotional people. My daughter tells me that I'm an emotional senti cutlet when it comes to dealing with women. So I think the roles are reversed. We are all products of our learning histories. It's not power. It is not intent. It is not genetics. It is how we learn. I can produce before you a counterintuitive research. It is assumed that when a war begins between two nations, women are prone to oppose it more, but women do oppose more than men do. But when the war is underway, women are vociferous in support of the war, much more than men do. So you can see it's not a stereotype anymore than you think it is. And when we go out of these stereotypes, we learn to do differently. Ever since my daughter was born, I'm getting educated every day. You know, I make all these mistakes. I do not know how to address a girl growing up, and so teaches me. And it is my learning history. I'm a product of that. And today, if I've gotten a little more refined than ever before, so as to admit 54% women in our cohort, you must give the credit to this little kid who tells me every day that it's a lopsided world. And we need to rectify that. It's at the back of my mind. Thank you for such a momentous and a beautiful panel, and I learned so much from it. Thank you.
Thank you. So please join me once again in thanking our remarkable panelists, Titiksha, Dipakshi, Roberta in absentia, and Deepti for sharing their journeys from tolerance to transformation. And let's continue to make workplaces where respect is not requested, it's expected. So thank you so much.
Thank you for bringing us together. Thank you, sir. Thank you to all the esteemed panelists. May I request our director, Professor Debashish Chatterjee, to present the esteemed panelists with mementos. We also have with us Professor Priya Nair, the co-chair of GIT Conference 2025. Ms. Titiksha Srivastav, Ms. Dipakshi Mehandru, Ms. Deepti Bopaya, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.